During this Lent season. We are still in the middle of our Lent challenge, which consists of three aspects. One is a weekly fast where we fast breakfast and lunch on Fridays. The second part is to study a gospel. We are focusing on the book of John because that's actually what our sermon series is in for the next few weeks. And then last but not least, commit to corporate worship. So go to church. We would love to have you here in the Winston-Salem area. But if you are not in this area, just find a church. Find a church to be a part of and participate in corporate worship. Now, the reason I bring all that up is because our midweek devotionals have actually been setting the table for the Sunday sermon. I've been talking about something I'm not necessarily going to have time to talk about on Sunday, or something I want you to go ahead and be thinking about. And today we are in John 9 verses 1 through 41. I don't even have time to read all of the scripture to you because it's quite a long story by John standards, but I'm going to give you the cliff notes. So Jesus and his disciples walk up and they see a blind guy, and he's been blind since birth, his whole life. And the disciples say, Master, was it his parents' sin or his sin that caused him to be blind? And Jesus says, he's not blind because of anybody's sin. He's just blind so that he can show my glory. And then Jesus spits in some dirt, makes some mud, smears it on his face, and says, all right, go wash off in the pool of Siloam, and you're healed. And he does, and he's healed. Now, the interesting thing is, you think most people would be really, really excited to meet this guy, to ask him, hey, what happened? Who did this? But the Pharisees are upset. They are very upset, actually. So they start questioning him, and they say, hey, what happened? He says, hey, look, Jesus, spit in some dirt, spread it on my eyes, told me to go wash off in the pool of Siloam. Here I am, I can see. And they didn't believe him. They thought this is some other guy who looks like the blind guy, but this isn't him. So they bring in the blind guy's parents and say, hey, is this your son? And they said, absolutely. This is our son. He was blind from birth, and now he can see. We don't really have much more information than that. He is of age. You should ask him about it. So they say, okay. And they call him back in again, the blind guy, or the former blind guy. And they say, okay, you say that Jesus did this, but Jesus is a sinner. There's no way that Jesus did this. Tell the truth. Give God the glory. And he says, look, I don't know if Jesus is a sinner or not. All I know is I was blind. Now I can see. And he healed me. And the reason and we're going to stop there, and the reason I'm going to stop there is because that's where I want to be. The Pharisees are very upset because they say that this has nothing to do, he keeps saying this has nothing to do with sin. He's like, hey, look, you were born in sin. This is the Pharisees speaking. You were born in sin. Don't tell us about what we see and what we don't see. We are children of the light. They're really leaning on their heritage, their calledness from God. But here we have a strange dynamic. We have a guy who was blind from birth, who they would assume he was blind because of sin within his parents' lives or sin that he was probably going to commit in his life. But Jesus says, no. And I think this is an interesting place for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, we use this to justify people getting cancer a lot of times and people getting very, very sick. And we say, hey, look, this is for God's glory. That's a misrepresentation of what John is saying here. I think there's a lot of scripture that says God brings beauty and life out of chaos and in bad things. So out of cancer, out of those things. We see it over and over. We've probably seen it in our personal lives and in people that are connected with us, where God uses hard situations to bring beauty and his power and glory out of. But that's not what John is talking about here. John is doing something very, very different, actually. John is illuminating that the people who should see God, the Pharisees, the religious people, the people of Israel, they should see, because they are the ones who have had sight their whole lives, can't. But then there's all these blind people, notably the Gentiles, those who are not chosen, us, who can see. So, can you see? Are you spending time looking? First and foremost, do you open your eyes to see? I hope so. I hope we see God every day in our lives. I hope we're looking for God every day in our lives. And we don't blind ourselves by our preconceived notions of what the Messiah is going to look like or what God's kingdom is going to be like. Because it's breaking in today. So, open your eyes. Look for the kingdom. See where Jesus is working, even in the unexpected places. Hey, I hope to see you on Sunday. I hope to be able to develop this thought a little bit more with you then. Grace and peace.